that Martin has been asking this morning, and as well as then coming out of that deal in December 2024, which is what has been said, that is what will happen. So then the question is, Martin, did it achieve what it was supposed to achieve?
I actually believe that what they told us it was supposed to achieve, we achieved. But once we achieved, the question is, did we have an exit strategy? Because, like I said, it was a protectionism idea. The government of Kenya was trying to protect itself from the volatility of the dollars and the effect that it would have in the entire economy, not just the petroleum industry. But now the problem is, and this is where I see the truth is that we are losing some money, but not as much as we would have lost if the dollar was trading at that high rate today. But the question is, do we have an exit strategy? Have we put good economic incentives that will now maintain that if we go back to OTS, which means that we'll have now to buy directly, and that means that we'll have to procure dollars on a daily basis. Can the economy stand that kind of a demand on the dollar? Or will it now push the exchange rate again high? And if we are not prepared for that, for the exit, then for how long are we willing to stay like that? So either we devise a new model that may be a hybrid between OTS and G2G,
right?
Or we just brace ourselves and say that because we cannot exit, I promise you that it is not easy to exit.
Well, let's look at what government said. Right?
It's expiring, but it will always be renewed.
It will be an option. Well, let's see. The government admits that one of the challenges that the initiative faced was failure to meet minimum oil import volumes as agreed. They agreed that at this very minimum, we will bring fuel into the country.
Thank you,
right?
brought that idea.
So they said, look, we've not been able to do that, and that's what we agreed with the 3 Gulf-based oil exporters, which caused an extension of the program to December 2024. So I said, because of that, let's give it some more time, right? Government also went on to say in the first 6 months, the average monthly import volumes fell short of the monthly minimums agreed under the arrangement. This was due to lower demand from the domestic market as well as from the regional re-export market. I want to stick on to that point.
Please.
Why was there a lower demand from the domestic market of this G2G fuel? So they said, okay, let's at least have this very amount, but they didn't want to deliver fuel more than what was being consumed, because then essentially you wouldn't pay for it. But there seem to have been internal factors that affected this external agreement. And what was that? Because that's right where you sit, Martin. Why would there be lower domestic consumption of this petroleum?
At this point, I want to declare a conflict of interest and say that in other quarters, I discuss the whole economy, just not the petroleum industry. And this is one of the biggest questions that we've been asking, or rather have been looking at and doing a bit of write-up about. Anybody who has been keen in the Kenyan economy, the first time we started having a hit on the economy, serious hit, where every other sector felt and started to dwindle. And even if you look at the numbers from the guys who are in charge of the data, you realize that since 2018, at the very introduction of VAT in petroleum, that is when every other sector, I don't know about the media sector or these other sectors, but I know every sector that is associated, which works closely with petroleum industry, started taking a hit then.
Martin, which industry? Which industry?
Okay, I was just being polite.
Okay,
so if anybody else this has not been given, I've said this quite a couple of times, but it's not been given the attention it deserves. But if you look at it then, this is what happened. Value-added tax, at the face value, you add value on something and then you charge that tax. In petroleum, I said we have petroleum logistics industry. We don't add any value unless you say transporting it from point A to point B is value adding. And for me, that is a big issue, because what we did is that we loaded a cost without adding value. And today we are having 16% of the cost of petroleum not anchored on anything.
Say that again.
We are having 16% cost of petroleum in this country, not anchored on any value that has been added.
Give us an example of what you mean. If it was anchored on value, what would that look like?
let me give you an example and say, if, let's say petroleum is this water, this bottle I'm holding. If I was to add a value on this water and make it today, I'm selling it at 10 bob, and the government decided that there shall be value added on water, they need to have told me, or somebody need to tell me, what value now have I added today on this product? Because if I made it flavored water and they charge me now on the value,
that makes sense.
it makes sense.
Okay.
So what value have we added on petroleum?
Okay.
Cost.
You see,
The cost.
I like your sense of humor. If there's no value at all that we added on petroleum when we added a VAT, all the government wanted then was to add or collect some more.
right.
Look, there was a need for more
Yes.
revenue.
Yes,
That
but you
was what
see,
was required.
I need to tell us something. This now ties with what you just said, that the demand for petroleum has gone down in the country and in the region. Because everywhere now you go in the region, you'll find that there's value added tax. When President Kibaki came to power, what he did is that he abolished VAT on motorbikes. You know what that did to the industry?
The industry exploded.
It exploded. Because I've been arguing this way. The amount of money that the government collects in VAT on petroleum pales in comparison into what they would collect in terms of taxes of petroleum, the normal taxes of petroleum, if people was using petrol and diesel as they were using then. Because what has happened today, the VAT on petroleum today, if we knocked off the VAT on petroleum today, we're likely to do away with about 25 to 30 shillings from the cost of petroleum as it is
As it
today.
is.
Okay?
So that
Meaning,
Go
Yeah.
ahead, do.
that at the pump,
Would go to 150.
okay,
I wanted to bring in a headline here yesterday because
Yes.
I think it's most current and because of your area of expertise. I'm reading directly from the front page. Costly fuel looms on push for bigger oil dealer profits. Now what they're saying is we're looking at about 8 days for EPRA to review again. An EPRA-backed study proposes an extra 4.45 or rather 4 shillings per litre. The proposal could add to the cost of living pressure. You understand what that means?
I know.
And I just want to understand, if you explain it to us, because Kenyans will pay an extra 4 shilling per litre of fuel if a proposal in a study commissioned by the energy regulator is adopted, adding the cost of living. And the study by this particular consultants is proposing an increase in margins offered to oil marketing companies be increased by 12 shillings per litre from the current 8 shillings per litre. That is for the retailers, and the wholesale margin to be increased from 4 shillings to 4.6 thereabout. Now, what
That's
I'm
like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I think I have quite an information. I think yesterday I published a writing about that.
so what really are we looking at?
What we're looking at, okay, let me just hold the thread together with what we were saying before. So what I was saying is, before I lose that, is that if we drop VAT on petroleum, what would happen is, not long ago, City, if you and your friends would decide to go to Naivasha, and each of you'll find your way to Naivasha, and you'll eat your meat, and each of you will find their way to Nairobi. Today, you want to take Ndut for a function that she has. Most of you guys will carpool.
yes.
Yeah.
Because the costs have gone up. And this is the what I've been telling the government, that if they release VAT today, they'll take City back to a place where he can afford to drive his car.
Okay, sorry.
Without having to pull with somebody else to go to a certain function.
Okay.
And that will increase the uptake of the petroleum and more taxes on
It
petroleum.
sounds simple as you say it, but if let's just break it down so we can understand what we're saying here. That the thought is that, okay, government needs some more in terms of revenue.
I agree.
So what they do is that they slap a VAT on a product right?
Yes.
So that the 16% essentially is going to bring in more money. 'Cause
Yes.
if you spend on it, it brings in more money.
Yes.
But what actually happens in the market is totally different.
Exactly.
That people see, come on, this has become so expensive. So they decline to purchase,
Yes.
which would essentially give government what it was looking for in the first place. So that that action becomes counterproductive
Exactly.
and counterintuitive.
Exactly.
So what happens is that we all going to get in one car, use less fuel,
Yes.
and purchase less.
Yes.
But
You pay
if
them their VAT.
You pay them their VAT,
but
but
less.
we're
on what?
spending less.
Yes.
However, if you release that
Yes.
means Anki's buying fuel,
I'm
Martin's
buying
buying fuel, Ndu's buying fuel, CT's buying fuel. You get more.
You must have been a
into
very good
the
student.
pool.
You got it. Exactly. That is what I mean. They release more. They release that, we spend more. Today, let me tell you, they have also brought in, they give an avenue, and it's a very good thing because it is consistent with what the world is doing. You see, whenever you go, there are these communication masts everywhere. Those masts used to spend a lot of diesel. Today, they are all on solar. Why? Solar is cheaper than fuel. So you have VAT on fuel, but we are not using it. We are going for alternative modes of energy. So before you know it, what the VAT you are getting will become lesser and lesser and lesser. Before you know it, nobody is using that fuel.
In fact, Martin, in 2020, 2021, during the COVID period, something very strange happened. This VAT existed at 16%, and then the then President Uhuru Kenyatta reduced it to
8%, yeah.
Now, something strange happened. That year that I'm speaking of, the government projected a certain revenue. They actually met it.
Exactly.
Strange. They didn't increase taxes, they reduced taxes.
Yes.
You know what I find strange is that there is a certain madness and there's a certain narrative that people have had about austerity. It's utter lunacy. It has been proved conclusively that nonsense doesn't work. And yet you still find people speaking about it as though it's revolutionary, as though it's prophetic, that, this is what we must do. It has never worked.
No.
So what makes you think it's going to work for you?
Yeah. Okay.
This one, you don't need to be a student of economics to understand that the way economies grow and mushroom is when you release money into it, not when you take money away from it.
You incentivize
Yes.
and this is what I've been saying. We must stimulate the SMEs. And SMEs are you see, the government is not the greatest employer, it's not the biggest employer. All over the world, the private sector
it's not even their
is.
job.
The private sector is. And that's why I say it is lopsided when people look up to government for employment. The government today is competing with the private sector for money in commercial banks. The government will always win. And when the government wins that war, then you'll find that today, the only companies that are declaring profits at the end of the day is banks and multinational corporations who do not have to rely on the Kenyan economy to do what they do. So everybody else is having an issue. You can't get financing, and if you get financing today, there is no business today you can do and pay 20% on loans and make profit. You pay your workers and you are paying a loan of 20%. You cannot. There is no business. So today we are in a musical chair.
It's a horrible.
It is not coming. I don't want to lose your point because this is very important. So what has happened is that the government through EPRA is mandated that every 5 years they must conduct what we call the cost of supply of petroleum in the country. Why? Because, as I told you, we are in a command economy where the government tells you that you are selling at this much. So in 2018, we had the first COSOP. And that COSOP is supposed to be done every 5 years. Actually, the one that is happening right now is long overdue.
All right.
It's supposed to have happened last year. So this EPRA is supposed to engage consultants who are supposed to come now and independently look at the cost of supplying a petroleum product in the country and recommend the margins thereof, where they look at the plight of the common person and the people that are doing business in that value chain. So the conundrum here has been that in 2018, when it was first done, they gave a margin a gross margin of 12 shillings and a few cents in the whole value chain, which is distributed in this manner. 4 shillings and some cents is given to the person that imports.
Right.
You see, like today you're saying Galana and Gav and all that.
Yes.
For their troubles of importation, they'll get 4 shillings. Then there's an investor. I've told people time and again that most of these multinational organizations that you see here marketing petroleum, they don't own the infrastructure. So the infrastructure is City, after his retirement, he gets a package and puts up a petrol station and then leases it to a multinational. So for that lease, or rather rent, and the cost of that infrastructure, they have appropriated another 4 shillings and some cents. And then we have the person that now who carries and shoulders everything is called the dealer.
Yes.
That person at the pump is the one who has a contract with the multinational. When City gives his petrol station in future, it's very prophetic, it will happen. So when you give your petrol station to the multinational, they will in turn give it to a dealer. And that dealer now is the person who comes now and runs the whole station. And they have 4 shillings at the pump.
Okay.
So that was given in 2018. Now the problem has been, and this is what has cost so many people out of the market. You remember 2022, there's a time we had a gridlock in this country. There was no fuel anywhere. That problem has been occasioned by the fact that the multinationals who bring in petroleum had gotten to a place where they were making zero. And when they're making zero, they cost us now, the people who run the petrol stations at the last mile, they were selling to us the product at the cost of procurement. Yet, there's a law in Kenya that tells EPRA that this is the price that you must give.
Stated, yes.
And when they give that price, it is in contradiction with everything else. And so, we opted to close. A lot of us opted to close. And that's how the country ended up without fuel. Now, this study is supposed to look at what is the fair share of each of these person in the value chain. There is a very big misconception in the industry today. Every time you talk about petroleum, people confuse high capitalization for high profits.
Okay, so difference being between the two?
The difference is you remember, I don't know whether you remember, there was a case sometimes the people who vend airtime had an issue with KRA.
Yes.
Because they make a very small thin margin.
The margin is small.
So today, petroleum. Let me give you a very good example too. Today, you stop at the petrol station next year.
Yes.
You fuel 1,000 shilling of super petrol. The person at the pump will have made gross of 20 shillings. Gross. Meanwhile, they have washed your windshield. They have done so many things. Your pressure. Yes. You know, this is a high value customer. Why? Because most of the guys fuel 200. So in 200, this guy is making 4 shillings gross. Why? Because the cost of doing business since 2018 has more than doubled today.
Across board, and we're not just talking about... but here...
across board. But you see, the problem with petroleum is that it is regulated, it is statutory. You don't do it before 5 years.
Martin, is this why every petrol station now is a supermarket?
It is. People are in real estate. Thank you.
Oh, there we go.
People now who are doing petrol stations are not doing petrol stations to sell fuel. I own a petrol station. But I'll tell you this. Because I have a kinyozi that runs next to it. That kinyozi makes money than petrol station. And I'm telling you this. Why? Because that kinyozi will give me 1,000 bob maybe in a day. Money that I can get away from that. If I take 1,000 shillings from the sale of petroleum in a day, I've already eaten into the stocks. So there's something I've been telling the industry that petroleum dealers have been bleeding in hope. Because they are supposed to have this study done that now can remunerate them fairly in a way that they are able to pay their workers. Remember, this is an industry that employs over 1 million people in this country.
What needs to be done so that what previously was the case where people like you who are dealers actually find the enterprise worthwhile.
You see what happened when this study was done
Yes.
some 5 years ago. It was done based on a petrol station that is able to pull a throughput of 250,000 liters a month.
And how many petrol stations can do that?
Now, then they were a bit. Today, you and I know there's proliferation of petrol stations everywhere you
Everywhere.
go. People have this, and that's why I'm saying there's a
literally
misconception
kilometer.
because
Yeah.
this is a highly capitalized industry. People think that's how the margins are. The people forget immediately. We have even had to sit with KRA sometimes to also explain to them again that both the profit margins are controlled.
They're minuscule.
Because
yes.
people would expect that if you
Everybody's
invest
fueling.
$1 million,
Yeah.
you get at least 10%. In petroleum, you get less than 1%.
It's very interesting.
In terms of a profit that is accruable to you, net margin is less than 1%.
So where does I really need to understand where the misconception lies then, because one would assume that there's a petrol station, people are going to be driving. You rarely find an empty petrol station, right? You drive in and somebody's fueling. So the assumption, and it doesn't matter if they're 10 across the road, Mombasa Road, we can count between Haile Selassie Junction at the end of it before you get to the interchange. How many petrol stations are there?
There are
There's
many.
so many.
There are many.
But they're never empty.
The problem is they are not empty, but the people who are fueling there, I've told you, an average Kenyan today fuels, the one who is driving,
Yes.
fuels 300 shillings, an average Kenyan. So when you find somebody fueling 1,000 shillings, you're like, these guys, the gods must be on their side. Okay? The other guys who fuel a lot are the motorbikes. But the motorbikes now fuel 100 shillings.
Yeah,
But
that I think I
frequency-
know.
Yeah,
Which
yes.
Yeah,
But
they
the
can-
truth is, you cannot get to that volume. So, if you are selling 250,000 liters, then today you are selling 100,000 liters a month.
Oh dear.
Wow.
If you're selling 100 liters a month and you're making 4 shillings, and that is gross, and you're supposed to be this with the same workforce that you've been keeping, then it marries into what I've been saying, that people have been bleeding in hope. Why? Because we know that this is a sector that you cannot run away from. It's just like if you're used to a certain place, this is what you know how to do. So even when things go south, you hold into that place, hoping that it's soon things will look up. And that's what we've been looking at. And that's why this study
yes.
is very, very important.
Right.
Now, the problem is when people don't understand the other side, it becomes sensational. And it can easily become political fodder. Right now, this can easily become political fodder. But the truth of the matter is, every dealer you see operating, actually today I can show you the messages. Most of them have been telling me, Chairman, what do you think we are, where do you think we are headed? Is this thing becoming real? Because they just want to make a decision. So many of them have already abandoned the stations. Actually, if you realize, you'll find that some multinationals have employed a very a measure that is supposed to be an austerity, but to me is counterproductive, where now the petrol stations now are being run. They get somebody, previously they will get a dealer who will bear all the costs. But now they want to get to a place whereby they have an idea they call young dealers. They want now to employ somebody who just came from school and probably give him a salary of 40,000 or thereabout. He'll be very excited to run that. But at the end of the day, what happens is they are not able to shoulder the costs that are shouldered at the petrol station and employ the number of people that are employed. So at the end of the day, it becomes counterproductive in terms of job offers, and the accruable revenue to the government at the end of the day becomes an issue, because from those petrol stations, 1 million people, this is where you get pay as you earn, is where you're getting housing levy and all those kind of things.
I mean, we're going to have to end the conversation at this point, but we're still looking at a situation whereby, if not taking into consideration some of the things that we're talking about, it's going to get more difficult for a lot of folks.
Yes.
Whether you're purchasing, whether you're the one who's running the business, the business of petroleum, we know is not cheap, but we're looking at a situation where, okay, so come out of the G2G deal in December. Are you going to go back to an OTS? Are you going to have a hybrid of the two?
Are you ready?
Are you ready to do that? Those are questions that we must keep asking and continue to have this conversation. Martin Chomba, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you for being part of Kenya's biggest conversation this week. And we come to an end of it and say, have a wonderful day into the weekend. And we'll see you again on Monday, God willing, at 6 a.m. Good morning. It's 10 a.m.